Hey guys, Wolf Eat Dinner here. Welcome to my review of Kingdoms of Amalur: Re-Reckoning. This game is a remaster of 2012's almost identically named Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning. This by all means will be a hard review to do as I have an extreme fondness for the original game. I also am going to be as unbiased as possible. While this may seem difficult to do, the Western RPG standard has definitely risen over the past 8 years since the original's release. Many aspects of the game that were groundbreaking for Western role-playing games have now become standard, and by this token have dated some major parts of the game. Let's start with some of the positives. The combat was one of the things I remember most about this game, and I'm glad to report that it is still phenomenal. For anyone who is a fan of hack-and-slash games of yesteryear, you will surely appreciate how much of a punch is packed into combat, no matter what skill or class you select. There is an admittedly stale aspect to the combat that was not too bad back when the original was released, but several years later it is hard to appreciate when a game has quick time finishers during combat. But this is one thing that I can easily overlook, knowing that this is not a game that was straight from 2020 trying to shoehorn in that mechanic. As far as gameplay goes, I can assure you that if you are a fan of the Fable series or someone who is disappointed by it, you could pick up this game and be appeased by the better aspects of the title. To continue talking about the positives that were on offer for playing through this one, we have skill trees and destinies, which are a way to reward you for being loyal as well as dipping into varying skills. This is one of the aspects that still holds strong, as the destinies still remain to be something that isn't comparable to most other things in this genre. As well, there are many WRPGs that try to reinvent the wheel when it comes to classes and abilities. This game's upgrade system is simplistic, but also very rewarding, as almost everything has really good synergies both within its respective skill tree and throughout others. All in all, gameplay is very traditional for what you would expect from the era of games that was trying hard to break away from their Japanese counterparts. To move on from gameplay, I want to highlight a couple of other things. The story was written by none other than R.A.Salvatore. His style of writing lends itself so well to this medium. In a world that is vast for its time, there are tons of well thought out characters at play. If you're someone who likes to read up on lore, boy does this game have it. There is tons of lore to be found, whether it's by a book or listening to one of the 130 plus lore stones scattered throughout the world. There is something for anyone who appreciates world building. Even if you don't like to do that, the story is still rich enough with details to keep any fan of high fantasy satisfied. This works well paired with an excellent soundtrack done by the legendary Grant Kirkhope. Banjo-Kazooie, anyone? Sometimes the score sounds very Star Wars influenced, but I would say other than that, it captures the swells of action, mystery, and emotion rather well. There really isn't much I can say about the soundtrack that you couldn't just hear for yourself, so definitely give it a listen. There are also so many great high fantasy locations to explore. There are fortresses, laboratories, dungeons, swamps, towns. Hell, if you can think of it, this game probably has it. The enemies are also a highlight of the game, as there are many different types that you encounter in your journey, including most of the RPG tropes that you have probably expected to fight since your first experiences with Final Fantasy. Although I wish that I only had good news to report about this one, that sadly is not the case. Before I move on to the negatives, I would like to address the one thing that I stand firmly of neutral opinion on. I am truly apathetic to the graphical upgrades that were brought about with this remaster. I know you can't see me, but I was doing air quotes. The graphics have seen a slight overhaul, but I think other remasters have spoiled us. Looking at you, Crash Insane Trilogy and Spyro Reignited. That in essence is why I'm neutral. I think there were changes made, and for what they are decent, but by no means do they hold up to some other recent reworks of iconic games. With that being said, let's dive into the sea of negatives. Since we were on the topic of graphics, who loves visual glitches? You? Well, by George, do I have the product. This game unfortunately suffers from visual glitches. Some of the ones I included in my playthrough are as follows. My head disappeared in cutscenes. NPCs' heads disappeared in cutscenes. Weapons became invisible. Random textures from other areas would appear where they did not belong. There was a weird trigger for some treasure chests that was supposed to be underground that would be on top of the ground when I opened the chest. Those are just the ones I recall. But friends, I hate to tell you, it gets worse. On top of shoddy visuals, the game had a struggle performing. My computer is capable of rendering much prettier things, but there is a very common consensus that this game crashes for no reason. It happened several times to me when I am running the game at 220 frames per second or greater. Hell, it happened 2 times on stream. On top of that, I ran into 2 quests that were bugged, and it would not let me continue on that save file. Characters who were in DLC teleported to the mainline game even though you don't really have sidekicks. Overall, this game would be about a 1 out of 5 on the spectrum of, is this game optimized? Finally, to speak on the true negatives, the very hard difficulty. This was a feature that the community wanted 8 years ago. There was an achievement for the hardest difficulty at that time, which was hard. But is there an achievement for very hard? No. Do you get anything unique for beating the game on very hard? No. Do you get to carry an OP character into a new game plus mode? No, there isn't one. Do you even get the achievement for the hard mode for beating it on very hard? I know, I promise the question is rhetorical, and in this case, if you didn't infer from context, the answer is going to be no. So, what is the benefit for beating this incredibly unbalanced mode where most enemies can kill you with quite literally one hit? You can brag about beating the hardest mode of a very poorly received and incredibly outdated game. And yes, if I did not mention an aspect of this game, i.e. crafting, item gathering, or anything else, it is just because those aspects are outdated and I don't really need to talk about them because they have nothing to offer in this year of our Lord 2020. My final thoughts are this. If you want something that can be fun amid some major issues, and you are aware to not go into it expecting 5 stars in quality, this is a fun and wallet-friendly game at around $30. If you are a fan of the original, please pick this up and you'll have a great time, I'm sure. Other than that, this is a ridiculously outdated excursion that, other than a fun story, great combat, and some nostalgia, have little to nothing to offer. That is why this one's going to get a 4.5 out of 10 from me. I hope you all enjoyed this review, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe. Until next time, be good and much love.